Okay, so back again, part 3. Now we are going to start with Rogue. So, first Rogue card, 8 mana, 6/6, Task Greymane. Battlecry, replay every card from another class you've played this game, targets chosen randomly. I think a lot of the consensus is that this card isn't going to be very good because, basically, random cards from other classes tend not to be very good. So, in theory, you could, play a bunch of cards that you've stolen from your opponent's class, and you can double up on those effects with Task Greymane, getting a lot of value. Very much like the buff Paladin works, where those buffs become double when you play that minion that basically every buff you've cast, recast it on that minion. A 6/6, like you could argue it's kind of like a 6-cost minion, so you're paying about 2 extra mana to replay all the random effects that you've played from other classes. Now, it says every card, so that means spells and minions. So if you happen to add random minions to your hand, and those minions happen to be class cards from another class, those are actually going to get played immediately on top of Task Greymane. So that's actually worth mentioning. That's actually a big deal here. So spells, a lot of spells might be something like Backstab, right? But a minion is going to just be a minion for you. So that's, even though targets are chosen randomly, that will usually benefit you quite a bit. Though, also be careful you don't play any cards that, I don't know, blow up your own board like Anomalous, because that will hit the board when you play this. The only question really is then, because obviously you can milk enough value from it, is that when you play cards from other classes, is that going to like will your deck actually be able to perform well enough that you don't just die before you get these great extra bonus effects, like being able to have the card be played twice? Now, in their live stream, there was a Task Greymane based random, basically a random crap rogue deck that just plays cards like Face Collector to add extra stuff to the hand, and then eventually play Task Greymane. And it does have a lot of staying power, and one of the main reasons for that is Spectral Cutlass over here. 4 mana 2/2, whenever you play a card from another class, gain +1 durability. So in theory, you can keep playing cards from other classes, and that can lifesteal for a long time so that you can actually keep your health going. Now, when I first looked at Spectral Cutlass, I was looking at it a lot like it was sort of a bad Kingsbane, because if you play Kingsbane and you buff it up, and then you add lifesteal to it with like 3 cards, then it basically becomes a permanent lifesteal card that can continue to gain value. Whereas Spectral Cutlass, if it's destroyed once, you're kind of boned. So, and you can't redraw it from your deck as well. So I'm not sure if Spectral Cutlass is actually better than Kingsbane, but at least in theory, you play Spectral Cutlass, you never have to play another weapon because you're going to keep playing cards to basically random cards to buff that up, and then your Spectral Cutlass is going to lifesteal for you, and you're going to survive until the late game, which is when your Task Greymane hits the board, and you might outvalue your opponent. So, in the idea of playing a value rogue, these 2 cards do make some sense. I think it would take some experimentation though to figure out, well, would you put Task Greymane in a Kingsbane rogue, or would you play Spectral Cutlass instead, since that directly benefits from random cards being played? It is a big downside for this card that it can be destroyed permanently with just an ooze, and then you don't have any more lifesteal, and then your deck kind of falls apart. We'll have to see how much weapon hate is going to be out there. Overall, though, it does seem like it could come together and be something of a late game value rogue. But, of course, we'll need playtesting. So let's talk about some of those other minions. Face Collector, I guess you could argue it goes in that deck. You might get random legendaries from other classes, and then those legendaries, when you play them, would also come back with Task Greymane, and that could be really good. Like you get a, I don't know, like a Splinter Graft, the 8 mana 8/8 legendary from Druids. You play that, and then you get another 8/8 when you play Task Greymane, and that is really good value. But just on its own, like adding 3 random legendaries to your hand for 9 mana or something along those lines, plus getting 6/6 stats on the board is kind of weak, so I don't really know about Face Collector. I feel like it's not necessary for this deck, and I'm not really sure where else it would fit in, so it might be a little too weak to see play. but it's worth testing, of course. I mean, most cards are, well, a chunk of cards are worth testing. Some are just total crap. For instance, total crap cards. Wanted. 4 mana, deal 3 damage to a minion. If that kills it, add a coin to your hand. I think that Blizzard is kind of overvaluing coin here. Yes, if you're playing Miracle Rogue, you can draw an extra card with that coin, and the coin might also be able to give you that extra mana to play another 1-cost spell from your deck. But aside from that, there's not really anything that super benefits Miracle Rogue this set, and the cost to actually get that coin is a lot. So kind of seems really crappy to me. I don't think that's going to be the direction that Rogue goes this expansion. And even if it was, I'm not sure you would even include this in Miracle Rogue. I mean, 3 damage for 4 mana is just so costly. Even if you think of it like 2 mana, deal 3 damage to a minion, draw a card, which is a coin, it's not really that good. Is a coin better than just drawing a card? You would have to be pretty hardcore into the Miracle style for that to really be argued for. Like, coin being equal to draw a card. And then you have to play it on 4. You can't play it turn 2 Frostbolt. You have to be like turn 4, kill a 2-drop. Not very good. So next up, Cursed Castaway. 6 mana, 5/3, Rush. Death Rattle, draw a combo card from your deck. So you could think it like 6 mana, deal 5 damage to a minion, draw a card. Which is a lot like Starfire, but I would argue it's better than that. I think that any of these Rush minions, which have a few points of health, are better than a spell that does that much damage to a minion, because these minions, if they attack a low attack minion, might actually be able to survive, and then you actually get them to have to respond to it, or you get a second trade. So there's potential for Rush minions to trade 2 for 1, whereas spell would usually be 1 for 1. And worth noting here, with all these Rush mechanics, it really punishes low attack minions really hard, because a lot of these Rush minions, they only have a few points of health, but if you are actually able to use the Rush minion, hit a minion, like a 1-attack minion, kill it off or severely weaken it, and then still have your Rush minion on board, usually you're going to get insane value from that. Like, kind of like Battle Cry, deal 5 damage to a minion, and then have a 5/2 on board with a Death Rattle draw a card effect. Sounds really good. So, like Stonehill Defender might get punished super hard this set with all the Rush cards. That's actually an interesting thing. Like, we'll get to the point where playing Stonehill Defender is actually bad, because like these Rush minions will capitalize so much on it that you can't really play low attack, high health taunt minions, because they're just going to get crushed by a Rush deck. Who knows? Anyway, it seems like a pretty solid card overall. Kind of supports that value rogue theme. The fact it's a Rush with 5 attack also means, you know, it's got some tempo game going to it, so not too bad overall. And if there are very specific combo cards you want in the late game, then kind of tutoring for those combo minions might be a thing. It's also combo card, not combo minion, so if there's a combo spell like Eviscerate, that's also possible to be drawn. Okay, next up, Mistwraith, 4 mana, 3/5. Whenever you play an Echo card, gain +1/+1. A lot of people compare this to Questing Adventurer, which is 3 mana, 2/2. Whenever you play any card, gain +1/+1. Obviously, this card has a few extra stats on top of it, but Questing Adventurer costs 1 less mana and works with any card. So there is an argument that would say Questing Adventurer is just better, but honestly, that's only in really extreme cases where you are realistically able to play like 5 cards after you play the Questing Adventurer, which is like Miracle Rogue. But a 4 mana 3/5 can hit the board and actually survive a turn, whereas Questing Adventurer will always be removed. So the fact that this can wait until your next turn for you to benefit from those Echo cards and gaining the +1/+1 might actually be a huge difference. The health does really matter on this minion. And if you're trying to go for a value deck and your opponent has to trade into a 4 mana 3/5, then kind of in the long run, maybe that's good for you. Maybe the fact they have to trade into your minion means you survive to actually do your Test Greymane stuff. So it's not too bad. It's not too bad. I'm not sure it's better than Questing Adventurer, but it's a worthy consideration, especially if you're going to be playing Echo cards. Obviously. I mean, you probably only play it if you have Echo cards in your deck. Or if you want to fake if you have Echo cards in your deck, but that's a little too next level. Okay, so anyway, 2 mana Pickpocket. Next spell, Echo. Add a random card from your opponent's class to your hand. So you could do 10 mana, steal 5 cards from your opponent's class and add it to your hand. Not really steal, it's add. It's not like you're taking it from the deck. 2 mana, get 1 card, pretty bad. 4 mana, get 2 cards, pretty bad. It's kind of pretty bad at all levels, but if you're specifically playing a Tescray main deck and you do have a dead turn where you're low on cards and maybe it's control versus control and your opponent's waiting for you, you can capitalize on that and say like, okay, I'm just going to steal 5 cards, your move, go. And that's actually not too bad. It's really bad for tempo, but if you have a dead churn, it's not unreasonable to see Pickpocket being okay. And if you do have a bonus effect like Mistwraith or Questing Adventurer, then you could kind of justify just replaying it, and then it's like a +1 buff, and a +1/+1, and get a random card from your opponent's class. That's a little bit more to like 2 mana actual value, I would think. So it looks really bad, but it might support this kind of archetype just enough. Like, this might be the best way to get those random cards at the moment. Though, one thing I want to point out, from the Frozen Throne set, there was another legendary that kind of fits this theme called, what's her name? Ah, crap, I forget the name of it. It's a 4 mana, 4/5, Battlecry. All your spells in your hand become spells of your opponent's class, I believe. So you could just take your rogue spells and turn them into random spells from your opponent's class. Like if you decide you no longer need Phantom Knives because it's turn 9. So that could be a better, more tempo-based way to actually get those random cards rather than having to use Pickpocket. But experimentation needed. I think I would probably go the legendary route rather than Pickpocket because it's a lot faster. What?
Oh. Tomato sprout and spinach sprout too. Each of them sprout just a bit though. Just like tomato, just 1 or 2 in each. But the spinach is just 1 out of 2 pots, and all of the ideas like this high.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll take a look after I'm done here.
Kids are growing fast these days.
Okay, so apparently our vegetable garden now has some growing stuff in it. I am the best farmer ever, apparently. So yeah, sorry about that. Where were we? We were talking about how Pickpocket sucks and how the legendary from the Frozen Throne is better. I think it probably is. If you really want to get the Tescray effect, I think churning your rogue spells, which are more tempo focused, early game focused, into late game control cards, and then getting them to play twice, seems pretty good to me. And Pickpocket is just kind of too slow, so yeah, we'll have to experiment. But I mean, altogether it seems like a very slow archetype, and it does have enough value to win. It's just a question of, is it fast enough to win, and is it durable enough to survive? Because as I see it right now, you destroy the Spectral Cutlass with like a weapon destruction, and the whole deck falls apart, and then it's like lol value rogue, right? Oh, so here's a card that actually does kind of benefit with Spectral Cutlass. 3 mana, 2/4, Pirate, Cutthroat Buccaneer combo, give you a weapon +1 attack. So that obviously synergizes here. If you build up a bigger lifesteal weapon, then you become a lot more durable. 2/4 stats and 3 mana are not great, but I mean, with the combo +1, it becomes a pretty reasonable card. Might be better in Kingsbane Rogue, though, to be honest. I mean, Kingsbane Rogue really wants to buff up that weapon attack because that weapon is indestructible. You just have to keep bringing it back. But not too bad with this one either. Which one is actually better in a random card rogue? A little hard to tell. The advantage of Spectral Cutlass, though, is you don't have to play the Give a Weapon lifesteal. The disadvantage is it's very vulnerable to weapon destruction. So this card, pretty decent. I mean, weapons seem to be pretty important for rogue right now, so I think this will see some play as just a decent supporting card. Also, just a decent option in any kind of pretty tempo-heavy rogue that's going to be relying on the weapon a lot. Basically, like Aggro Kingsbane, Miracle Kingsbane, whatever. Anything with Kingsbane in it. So, Blink Fox. 3 mana, 3/3, add a random card from your opponent's... add a random card to your hand from your opponent's class, sorry. So basically, Pickpocket, except you get a 3 mana, 3/3 on it. You pay 3 mana, you get 1 card. Infinitely better than Pickpocket. It's just a question of, are you going to have a dead turn where you really want to spend 10 mana drawing 5 cards? Kind of drawing 5 cards. Adding 5 random cards to your hand. I would way sooner play Blink Fox than I would play Pickpocket. You might not even want like a million random cards to go off when you play Task Greymane, because maybe one of those random cards is like Twisting Nether and it stops making sense. So maybe you only want a few to go off so you get a lot of value, but you don't accidentally play a card that's going to ruin Tess. Yeah, so Blink Fox is a pretty solid value minion. Fits into this deck, obviously. It's just a question of, is that deck fast enough to not just die? Cheap Shot, 2 mana, deal 2 damage to a minion, Echo. I think this is quite a bit better than Pickpocket Echo. Because this is actually fighting for the board a bit. If you have 10 mana and you play it 5 times, it's going to do 10 damage as spells. Obviously, it benefits from spell damage. So if you have like a Blood Mage Thalnos on the board, 2 mana, deal 3 damage to a minion repeatedly is pretty good. Like if you could have a turn 10, 5 Frostbolts, that sounds pretty reasonable. Given it doesn't freeze, but you're just trying to clear the board. Good with Mistwraith. Like maybe you could do a turn 6 Cheap Shot, give this +3/+3, deal 6 damage. Seems reasonable, especially if you're going for kind of those more value plays. And I think one thing to note about Echo for Rogue specifically is that a lot of Rogue spells really suck in the late game. Like, they're more focused at tempo plays. So having a spell that you can actually just keep with you later on is a kind of a big deal for Rogue, because like you can actually have a removal that's decent on turn 10, or you have a value gain, which is pretty bad overall, but you could play on turn 10 if you are just trying to get extra card value. Overall, Rogue as a class, not a lot of support for much else, but this kind of random stealing Rogue. But cards like Cursed Castaway, Cutthroat Buccaneer might just be decent cards to fit into previous decks and just kind of call it good as well. So let's move on to Shaman, probably the big winner this set. So Shudderwalk is the craziest minion in the set, bar none. 9 mana, 6/6. Battlecry, repeat all other battlecries from cards you played this game, targets chosen randomly. So when it says targets chosen randomly, I think that applies to, well, it really only applies to spells or battlecries, sorry, that actually have targets. So if your battlecry is something like the Serenite Chain Gain, which copies the minion that it battlecried from, then it's guaranteed it's going to copy Shudderwalk and you get a 6/6. If you have like battlecry deal 3 damage randomly, like the Kobold Apprentice, I think it was called, from Kobolds and Librarians, Kobolds and Catacombs, then it's going to battlecry, it's going to deal 3 damage randomly to enemy minions. But if you have other minions, or the battlecry effects go off, like add a copy of this minion to your deck and it's targeted, then your Shudderwalk can be copied to your deck and you can get Shudderwalk again, basically giving you infinite late game value. And yeah, it's just a matter of which battlecries do you want to put in your deck to make this card insane. But if you saw the first match in the live stream, go watch it if you haven't. It can really churn out to be an absolutely insane card in the amount of fun and also theoretically the amount of value from it. So I think it kind of makes that like late game value control Shaman come together, honestly. I think it's a really solid card, and it might in itself just create that new control Shaman archetype almost single-handedly, but with Hagatha the Witch over here, it gets a little bit better than that. So Hagatha the Witch, I covered that in part 1. So it does fit the control theme. It deals 3 damage to all minions, which includes your own minions, so you're not going to be building like a totem-based deck, obviously. But whenever you play a minion, you get a random spell in your hand. It really lets that control Shaman can have endless value, and it's just a matter of dissecting your opponent and taking all of this stuff out as time goes on. Pretty solid hero. I think Shudderwalk is even better than that. I don't think Hagatha the Witch is 100% mandatory. It's just a pretty good card to include in that kind of deck. Though that once again, if you are building a Hagatha the Witch deck, you're completely giving up on the board focused nature of it, because you're not going to have any more totems, and the battle cry is anti-tempo. It's more just to reset the board. But yeah, pretty cool legendaries overall. Shaman gets some pretty good ones. Next up, Bog Shaper. Whenever you cast a spell, draw a random minion from your deck. It's a 7 mana for a elemental, which means you can discover it off of cards like Servant of Kalismos. Overall, it doesn't seem to be a mega powerful card. The problem with it is that it costs so much mana that playing a spell with Bog Shaper seems pretty unrealistic in a lot of cases. And there's only so much card draw you're really going to want in a super late game deck. So it might be the case where you could play Bog Shaper, but maybe you don't actually need to draw more cards because you're already so late game playing cards like Hagatha the Witch or Shudderwalk that it's kind of unnecessary. Though you could cast away those cards and you could just play a straight up elemental deck with a lot of value going for it, and maybe that makes more sense. And there are some new low cost Shaman spells that also would be pretty decent with us. So next up, Totem Cruncher, 4 mana, 2/3 taunt. Battlecry, destroy all your totems, gain +2/+2 for each destroyed. You'd have to destroy at least 2 totems for it to be remotely good, which would make it like a 4 mana, 6/7 taunt that you have to sacrifice 2 kind of useless minions for. Overall, I think this card is not going to be anyway good enough. But if you want to play it in a meme deck, I would try to combine it with the cards from Kobolds and Catacombs, where you're trying to summon Alakir the Windlord by summoning all 4 totems and then playing the Alakir Wind Speaker Summoner guy, and you get a free Alakir. And that deck was a complete joke, and I don't think I ever saw any play, but it sounds so much fun. So you could play Totem Cruncher in that, and then like if they kill your totem and you know you can't get all 4, you always have your backup plan of making like a 6/7 or a 8/9 4 mana Totem Cruncher beast guy, and then it gets earth shocked or silenced and you just lose the game anyway. But yeah, it's cute, but probably not going to be played. Okay, Merkspark Eel, 2 mana, 2/3. If your deck has only even cost cards, deal 2 damage. Really solid if you can actually get that effect off. And you could compare it a lot to like a Medivh's Valet, which is rotating out, which was an insane card for Secret Mage deck. One of the things that actually pulls that deck together, being able to play a 2 mana, 2/3 and deal 3 damage conditionally. So you play this in a, again, gray main deck. Your totems cost 1, and then on turn 2 you can play this, kill whatever they played on turn 1, and continue to benefit from having 1-cost totems as things go on. You could also, you know, maybe if you want, you can play Totem Cruncher in that deck, and maybe you do play the Alakir Windlord summoning thing as a even cost. But that doesn't work because the Alakir guy is a 5 mana, 5/5. Damn, that almost was a thing. Kinda. It was almost a meme, but it's not even a meme. Okay, well, if you can make a totem-based deck, maybe it's just a Bloodlust deck, a standard Bloodlust deck, then this is a really good card to put in it. It's worth experimenting with. Bloodlust decks have historically actually been pretty threatening. Obviously, if your opponent knows you have Bloodlust, they have to take your totems a lot more seriously. And your totems cost 1, so you can get a lot more of them. Next up, Earth and Might, 2 mana spell, give a minion +2/+2. If it's a elemental, add a random elemental to your hand. So it's a lot like that Beast Druid card, which I think is rotating out, which is 2 mana, Mark of the Beast, give a beast +2/+2, and if it's a beast, draw a card. Kind of comparable in power. One advantage is... Oh, no. That Mark of the Beast doesn't have to be played on a beast. It's just if it's a beast, you draw a card. So adding a random elemental is probably slightly weaker than drawing a card straight up, but I think as a synergy, elementals are a lot more powerful than beasts are. At least in the past. I mean, there are a lot of beasts coming out in this set, weirdly enough. So the fact that it's a random elemental is a little less good than just drawing a card straight up, but it's not bad, and +2/+2 and almost draw a card is really, really good. So this card would go into elemental decks for sure. You could play it with Bog Shaper, or you could just hope that one of those random elementals you get becomes a Bog Shaper. I feel like Bog Shaper is more of a discover it or get it randomly card, and then in the late game that one of maybe draws you a few extra minions from your deck, which hopefully are elementals, but probably don't put in your deck. I don't think it's quite that competitive. Earth and Might though, really good for elemental shaman. Is it enough to push the archetype? hard to say. I'm kind of leaning no, but it's nice. And it's not a bad random card to get off of Hagatha the Witch or other add random spells to your hand either. Blazing Invocation, 1 mana, discover a Battlecry minion. So it's a lot like other Discover cards, some of which have seen play before, and if you are playing like a Shudderwock deck, maybe one of those Battlecry effects ends up being really good. Maybe you do need a specific Battlecry at a specific point in time. I can't really think of too many like super amazing Shaman Battlecries that you have to have. Like, there's a lot of good ones, like Fire Elemental, 6 mana, 6/5, deal 3 damage to a minion. But is there anything like, well, when this Battlecry happens, it's exactly the card you need to not lose the game, or something of that nature? It might just be a decent card to play there. Maybe you play it more for the fact that like you can have cards like whenever you cast a spell, draw a minion from your deck, and then it's just a cheap spell. So Violet Teacher maybe, Bog Shaper maybe, and then discover a Battlecry minion. Usually Shaman Battlecry minion is going to be a good card to have, so it kind of works out well for you if that's how you're playing it. I think it's worthy of consideration in any deck that's that kind of style, but it doesn't really seem to be any other immediate synergies other than like Shudderwock at the moment. So we'll have to see. And here's that Echo Murloc card, a 2 mana 2/2 Echo. You can use it in Quest Murloc to complete the quest very easily by just playing 5 Murlocs on 10 for 10 mana. But honestly, in Quest Murloc, you probably have it done a lot sooner than that, so it's not really necessary to, I think, put Ghostlight Angler into a deck like that. You're probably more focused on playing your good Murlocs, getting out the quest completed. You play the 5 mana 8/8, and then you fill your hand up with 9 Murlocs, rather than playing a card that's really slow, like Ghostlight Angler, and then it costs you 1 card, but you get 5 really bad cards on the board. That doesn't really feel like it fits there. But as an alternative, you can like play it 5 times and get 5 random spells from Hagatha the Witch, and that does seem pretty okay. So I'm not totally sure if it fits in there as far as being good enough, but it is like a scalable minion, so you can't really underestimate that too much. It might be able to get you decent value. Maybe it's a good filler turn, who knows. Next up, Witch's Apprentice, 1 mana 0/1 beast, taunt, add a random spell to your hand. So kind of like the Babbling Book that mages had, which was 1 mana 1/1, add a random mage spell to your hand, but didn't have taunt. I feel like Babbling Book is often a little bit better. You could argue where the taunt in the late game, if they don't have a Fire Blast, then maybe it blocks 6 damage because their minion has to hit the taunt minion. But I think that is pretty rare. Do you put it in a Hagatha the Witch Shudderwock deck? Well, it is a minion, so when you play this after having Hagatha the Witch, you do get 2 random Shaman spells to your hand. That's something. But beyond that, it does seem pretty weak overall. Only really fits into that kind of deck. Well, if you transform it, if you evolve it somehow, like there was a card from Kobolds and Catacombs, I think it's like a 5 mana 1/1 Battlecry, turn a minion into a 6/6 elemental. So you play this to get the random effect, and then you churn it into a 6/6. That card never saw any play, but thinking along those lines, taking a bad minion and making it into a decent one is not unreasonable, especially in Shaman, and especially in Wild, where you still have access to every evolve card. Next up is Zap. So 0 mana, deal 2 damage to a minion, overload 1. It's actually nice in several ways. So 0 mana spells obviously are not to be underestimated, because you can always play them. It's really like a 1 mana spell, but I think it's better than that because you can just have your next turn be a little less worse, but this turn is good. So if you were playing Gadget Sand Auctioneer, on turn 6, you can play Zap without even using a coin, and then that draws you an extra card. Now, Miracle Shaman, I don't know about that. But anything else that's similar that can get you kind of the same effect, like Bog Shaper. Turn 7, you zap once or twice, and you get to draw 2 minions from your deck. That seems really good. Just in general, though, kind of delayed 1 mana, deal 2 damage to a minion is not too bad, and it's a pretty decent tempo card overall. It's kind of good for controlling the board, as long as you can afford to kind of empty your hand out with cards like Zap. Then it's a decent spell to have, and probably a little better than Lightning Bolt at this point, I think. So it's a cheap spell, good with spell synergies, of course. And if Bog Shaper is played, I think you probably would put Zap in your deck. So pretty decent. In Arena, it might be good in Arena, but you don't want to play too fast in Arena, because if all you have is 0-cost spells, then, well, you go out on card advantage pretty quick. But probably still good enough. Okay, next up, Warlock. So, oh, right, I forgot about this guy. Lord Godfrey. Might be the actual best card in this set. Who knows? Lord Godfrey, 7 mana, 4/4. Battle cry, deal 2 damage to all other minions. If any die, repeat this battle cry. I had a big video about the math on it and how it's really quite busted on my channel. So that would be Dark Skeleton on YouTube if you want to go ahead and check that out. But basically the idea is you can clear big boards, you can go through death rattles, and at the end of all of that, you're still going to have a 4/4 on the board, which is very favorable compared to something like Twisting Nether, where your board's going to be completely destroyed. And yes, given it does still destroy your own minions if you have any, but it is a very, very powerful removal spell. And it's even better in some ways because it gets completely around cards like Rebuke, which prevents you from casting spells. All your spells cost 5 more mana. And it also gets around Counterspell and things of that nature. They might not expect you to have a minion that can completely wipe the board. I mean, they probably will, because this will be played in every control Warlock deck now. But yeah, having the ability to go either minion-based removal or spell-based removal gets around those weaknesses of Counterspell and Rebuke. It's also just straight up better than Twisting Nether to begin with. I think it'll be played in literally every control Warlock deck. At least ones that don't control by having more minions on the board. But, I mean, what kind of control deck does that? Okay, so Glinda Crowskin. 6 mana, 3/7, minions in your hand have Echo. So this is a really scary card. I'm not totally sure on what applications it has yet, but I think given how cards like the 4 mana 3/4 that when you summon a Death Rattle minion, you get to trigger that Death Rattle immediately, have played out where it actually does see play, even though it seems kind of weak on the surface. I could see this kind of minion having some pretty good applications. So one obvious example is the Kobold Librarian. It's a 1 mana 2/1. Draw a card, deal 2 damage to your hero. So you play Glinda Crowskin and 4 Kobold Librarians in the same turn. You draw 4 cards. You get a 3/7 and 4 2/1s. Did I say 3 cards? I said draw 4 cards. So that seems pretty good there. If this lives on the board, then your the potential of what you can do with it kind of becomes so scary that this kind of card has to be removed. 3/7 stat line is kind of weak, but you know, if your opponent's playing aggro decks, most of their minions probably don't have more than 3 attack. So if you can play it like as a 7 mana, or well, I guess it would have to be at least turn 8 for the Echo to work. But anyway, if you can put it on the board and it effectively has taunt because your opponent has to remove it, that's not too bad as a defensive play. But then against the control decks where you can't afford to just wait till turn 10 and maybe draw 4 cards, gets a little bit better. It's not nearly as OP as Lord Godfrey, but it is a scary card to watch out for, and it might be the case that in the future there's some minion that's so busted where you play it with Echo that this becomes really good. Maybe Wisp. You play a 0-cost minion and then you can Echo it 6 more times, and then it becomes Glinda Crowskin, 6 mana, 3/7, summon 6 1/1s. I don't know. Seems pretty bad, but you know. Okay, Deathweb Spider, 5 mana, 4/6. If your hero took any damage this turn, gain lifesteal. So this kind of deck is basically Suicide Warlock. You take lots of damage, you make your Spell Stone power up to where it deals 7 damage and lifesteal 7. So in that kind of deck, you're going to lose health, of course. I mean, Warlocks are pretty good at losing health because that's the hero power. And having lifesteal on a minion is not too bad. This is better than a Bloodworm, which is 5 mana 4/4, because obviously it has that 2 extra health, which does make a big difference. High health and lifesteal makes a really big difference because that often is the difference between being able to be removed with 1 card or 2 cards, and if they have to use 2 minions, then you heal for 8, and that's pretty good. I mean, remember, 5 mana 4/6 is already kind of your standard stat line for a 5-drop, so 4/6 with the lifesteal is pretty competitive. And all you need to do is take a little extra damage, and there's a lot of ways you can do that in Warlock. So I think this might be decent, maybe in something like Zoo, who knows. Okay, Ratcatcher, 3 mana 2/2, Rush, Battlecry, destroy a friendly minion and gain its attack and health. So the stats on this are pretty bad by itself, and you need something to power it up. You could say, like, well, you destroy a Devil Sore egg, and it becomes a 3 mana 2/5 Rush, and it also converts your egg into a 5/5, and then a 3 mana 2/5 Rush gets to trade into a minion immediately, regaining board tempo. You get that 5/5 out. Seems pretty decent in like a Zoo deck. There's also a new egg, which is a 1 mana 0/3, add a random dragon to your hand. So you get that effect off, and you make this into a 2/5. As long as you can live long enough to benefit from those egg-based effects, it's not too bad. It's a lot better because it has Rush. I don't think it's like super competitive, but it's worth considering at least. And then next you have Blood Witch, which is 4 mana 3/6. At the start of your turn, deal 1 damage to your hero. 4 mana 3/6 is a good stat line, and traditionally cards in Warlock tend to have worse stat lines because obviously with the hero power of Warlock, if Warlock cards were always as good as other cards, then Warlock would tend to be kind of tier 1, which it sort of is right now. But dealing 1 damage to your hero is kind of a drawback in a way, because you are going to take damage. It is at the start of your turn, and probably you're only going to take 1 or 2 damage over the course of a game, because this minion's going to get traded away. It does benefit you in that your Spellstone will be buffed up, and if you are playing Suicide Warlock, where if you have minions where if you took damage already this turn, you get extra effects, it does make it justified to kind of run a Blood Witch in there. So with Duskbat down here, which we'll cover in a minute, Deathweb Spider, and Spellstone, maybe it could be some kind of Zoo deck. It's not too unlikely. But outside of that, if you don't have a lot of these effects where you actually want to take damage, then taking damage unnecessarily is kind of not great. So yeah, that might be one archetype. Next up, 2 mana, Curse of Weakness, Echo, give all enemy minions -2 attack until your next turn. There are a couple cards, like the big new Stumpy Stumpy 6 mana 2/7, destroy all minions with 2 or less attack, that can benefit from this. It's kind of like giving the Potion of Weakness, or whatever it was called, from Priests to Warlock. It's also echoable. So if you have a board of minions, you can use this and trade into all their minions without your minions taking damage. That's pretty good. If you do play that kind of Stampeding Kodo effect, then dropping your opponent's health down to a level where they are targetable with that is pretty good as well. But is it good enough to actually include both of those in the deck? Because alone, those cards aren't really super competitive. It's also an Echo card, but I don't really think there's anything that Echo actually seriously benefits Warlock specifically. Like, obviously there are good things you can do with Echo, but there's not like a minion that gives you extra effects if you do play an Echo card. So kind of limited to those applications. You trade your board into their minions without your board dying, and then you have the superior board. Or you play Stampeding Kodos, or the AoE Stampeding Kodo, with Curse of Weakness, and you kill their board in a different kind of AoE removal fashion. It might be okay enough to see play, just because probably some decent AoEs are getting rotated out. Maybe that kind of play is better than Twisting Nether, because you don't want to kill your own minions. Next up, Dark Possession. Deal 2 damage to a friendly character, discover a demon. So it's kind of similar to the Dark Pact, I think they called it, where you destroy a friendly minion, straight up, you heal 8, which is, obviously healing 8 is really good for control decks. This is slightly different. It doesn't straight up destroy minions, it deals 2 damage to a friendly character. So if you have something that you'd want to take damage, but you don't want to destroy outright, like an Acolyte of Pain, that's one possible application. But if the minion only has 2 HP, like the recruit guy that recruits out demons, then hey, dealing 2 damage is enough to destroy it. So if that's what you wanted, you can discover a demon with that rather than healing for 8. And maybe you already have enough like life gain, life steal in the control Warlock, where getting a demon discovered is actually better. Now, I don't super see that. I think that the heal 8 is going to be better, and I don't think this super fits into zoo-style decks. There's not too many minions that you really want to destroy, at least ones that have 2 or less attack, 2 or less health, sorry. The eggs typically have 3 health, so this doesn't actually do that. So I'm not exactly seeing the direct application for it, but it's a card to watch out for. Destroying your own minions, discovering a demon, 1 mana. It's a card that can be used in some kind of combo at some point in time in the future. If you just do the standard, you know, Dark Pact stuff, and for some reason you wanted to discover a demon instead, then that's fine. You can do it that way. But to see that this card being better than just healing 8, I don't quite see that yet. Only if your deck is more focused on tempo, then maybe getting a minion is better than healing 8. I don't super see it though. Next up, 4 mana, summon 4 1/1 imps, Fiendish Circle. It's okay. I feel like Implosion back from the GVG set is way better than this, which was 4 mana, deal 2 to 4 damage to a minion, and then summon imps equal to the amount of damage dealt, which does scale with spell damage for both the damage dealt and the imps you get. But this is guaranteed for 1/1 imps. Is there anything in Warlock where you would want a lot of little guys to just run around and trade into enemy minions right now? I don't super see it. It's not like there's a quest Warlock where you have to summon so many demons. It's worth mentioning though, if you do need more demons in your deck, but you want to cheat out the big demons like a Void Lord, this can get you demons as a spell without being a recruit target, but I don't see the application for that yet, so I don't think this is going to see play. 4 1/1s for 4 mana is not really good. They only played that kind of card in Quest Murloc, because obviously those 4 Murlocs count towards the 10 Murlocs you need for the quest, and you get the quest done, and that's good. But there's no quest here, so I don't see what the point is. Okay, next up, Duskbat. 3 mana, 2/4. If your hero took damage this turn, summon 2 1/1 bats. So you get 4/6 of stats. All you need to do is take a little damage from like a Blood Witch. Would be very hard to get this effect to trigger on turn 3 unless you have like coin, like Kobold Librarian, coin, Duskbat would be a really strong play. But in any kind of zoo deck where you are going to be playing these damage effects, or maybe you just live tap and then you play this as a kind of like a 5 mana 2/4 plus 2 1/1s plus draw a card, draw 2 cards actually. That's pretty decent too. So I mean, I think this is just a good card. You don't have to have too many of these effects. You don't have to go all in with it. You're going to be playing Kobold Librarian, and you know that might be enough. Or Hellfire plus Duskbat, who knows? It's a really strong card, kind of comparable to Imp Gang Boss, which was one of the strongest GVG cards. No longer in Standard, of course. Okay, next up, Witchwood Imp, 1 mana, 1/1. Stealth, Death Rattle, give a random friendly minion, plus 2 health. So, yeah, if you play Dark Possession on this, you can get the plus 2 health effect immediately by killing off your own card, but what's the point of doing that? I think it's slightly better than Blood Imp, which is, I think it's a 0 mana, a 1 mana 0/1 or 0/2 right now. With Stealth, and every turn it gives 1 health to your minions, but does that normally last longer than 1 or 2 turns? Not really, and sometimes it just dies to AoE for no real reason. And I guess the Death Rattle plus 2 health is a little better than that, but is it good enough to run? It's iffy. It's worth noting it is a demon, so if you are going to buff it up with cards like Demon Fire, then hey, it's a target for that, and it's a stealth target for that. So it's very hard for your opponent to remove it without actually kind of overcommitting. Like, you wouldn't play Coin Arcane Explosion just to kill this off on turn 1. You'd let the opponent probably play the +2/+2 buff on it. But it's just kind of a meh card. There could probably be better options. Okay, Warrior. First up, Legendary, Black Howl Gunspire, 7 mana, 3/8. Can't attack. Whenever this minion takes damage, deal 3 damage to a random enemy. So if you're able to Whirlwind a bunch of times with something like Warpath, then obviously you can deal a lot of damage. Not only does the Whirlwind effects hit your opponent's minions, but the Black Howl Gunspire deals 3 damage a lot of times. Note it can hit opponents' faces, so probably a little better in kind of semi-aggressive tempo decks where you're okay with it hitting face because you are actually trying to kill them and not just outvalue. But overall, I think this game's kind of this minion is kind of too weak. Obviously, it's not really like a minion. Your opponent's not going to trade into it unless they can kill it in one blow. So, yeah, probably going to be a pass on this guy. I don't think like Warpath for 10 mana to make this trigger 5 times is good enough. It costs 17 mana to do that. Probably just brawling is better in most cases than going all in like that. So next up is Darius Crowley. 5 mana, 4/4 rush after this attacks and kills a minion, gain +2/+2. So this minion is probably underrated because this minion should really be looked at as like kill anything with less than 3 attack, that less than a 3/4 or 3/4 or less, and then it's like a 6/6 minion, sort of. Okay, so it's like deal 4 damage to a minion, and then you have a 6/3 or a 6/2 on back of that. That has to be removed because obviously if this gets to kill 2 minions, then it gets even more stat gain. So it's a big enough threat that your opponent has to kill it. The fact that it's going to pretty much 2 for 1, like it's going to kill a minion and then they have to use a spell on it, makes it good enough. I think I would try it out in control decks. I would also play it in Rush Warrior, which there's a lot of Rush cards as you can see here, so that might be a thing. It's overall a pretty solid minion and worthy of consideration. You could even argue like just in a straight up face warrior that just happens to play a couple of rush minions like Darius Crowley. It's not too bad. I mean, rushing and getting that minion out on the board and forcing your opponent to answer you while you hit them in the face with everything else, it's pretty good theoretically. Next up, Deadly Arsenal. So 6 mana, reveal a weapon from your deck, deal its attack to all minions. There's only one weapon in Standard that this would be remotely good with, which is Gorehowl, and if you draw your Gorehowl from your deck, then Deadly Arsenal does nothing. If you play 2 Gorehowls, then you're going to have 2 Gorehowls, and usually you only have time to play 1 if that Gorehowl has not been played in Standard for, I don't know, a year, maybe 2. So it does not seem good enough. I mean, the card itself is fine, but there's no good weapons to really support it. Yeah, it's just Gorehowl is the only weapon that really has enough damage to justify paying 6 mana for a removal effect that also kills your own minions. This card will not see play in this set, but it's worthy of consideration if they ever make like a 8 or 10 mana warrior weapon that just has an insane amount of attack for some reason. Yeah, I don't know what they were thinking. Like, they put this card in the set, but then they have no new warrior weapons. Like, I mean, that actually have high enough attack. It doesn't make a lot of sense. They just kind of randomly included it. I'm kind of salty about that, actually. I kind of wanted this card to be good, but it won't be. Not yet, anyway. So, Town Crier, sorry. 1 mana, 1/2, battlecry, draw a rush minion from your deck. Really, really strong. A 1 mana minion that draws a card from your deck is insane. Just look at Kobold Librarian, which is for Warlocks, which already have the card draw hero power, which makes it slightly less good, but you put it in every single Warlock deck because it's good in Zoo, because it's a 1 mana minion, and it's good in Control Warlocks because it's draw a card for 1 mana. And you take 2 damage, which also benefits the Spellstone, which pretty good. Okay, so Town Crier, yeah, probably going to be included in a lot of warrior decks. All you have to do is include 1 or 2 warrior rush minions, which could be just Darius Crowley, why not? And then that becomes worth playing. Next up, Fester Root Husk, 5 mana, 2/7 after a friendly minion attacks, gain +1 attack. Overall, the base stat line is kind of on the weak side. You have to actually attack with 2 minions for it to really become decent. And it's kind of hard to actually pull that off, especially in the same turn you play the Fester Root Husk, so it just kind of seems like an okay minion to me. It might be decent to pick up in Arena, but doesn't really feel constructed competitive to me. I don't think Warrior really has like the kind of deck where you're going to have 6 minions on board, and then, oh, it becomes like a 5 mana, 8/7, which even then is just like, oh, it's okay. I mean, Mountain Giants can be cheated out in Warrior for Warlock for 4 mana, and I guess with Druid now for 4 mana. So even if you have 6 attacks in 1 turn, it's a decent minion, but it's not like great. But more realistically, it's like a 5 mana 3/7 that needs to be removed, or it becomes a 4/7. And honestly, even as like a 4/7, it's not that threatening. Like a face deck can probably just ignore it anyway. So not super great. Next up, Militia Commander, 4 mana, 2/5. Rush, gains +3 attack this turn as a battle cry. So the turn you play, it's a 5/5, which is going to trade into just about anything on turn 4, giving you good tempo. And then it's going to remain on the board as something like a 2/2. So like killing off a minion, 5 damage, and then have a 2/2 on board. Like a 4 mana, 2/2 battle cry, deal 5 damage. That doesn't go through taunt. It's pretty good overall. Plus it's a rush minion, which means you can drop from Town Crier. Anything else that benefits with rush, like there's a new legendary that draws a rush card, can be drawn with Militia Commander. It seems like a good card. Good for control, good for tempo. Just probably a card that's going to be played in a lot of warrior decks this expansion. Red Band Wasp, 2 mana, 1/3. Rush, has +3 attack while damaged. So it's a lot better, obviously, if you actually get it damaged, because then it's a 4/2. You could also play it as a turn 2 answer to like a 2/1, such as a Kobold Librarian. So you rush down the Kobold Librarian, and then you're left with a 4/1 minion, which is okay. And then if your opponent doesn't remove it with like a Mortal Coil, then maybe it does 2 for 1. And 2 for 1ing for a 2 mana minion is really good. Where it's probably best with is in conjunction with Woodcutter's Axe. So it's a 2/2 weapon, and you give +2/1 to a random friendly rush minion as a death rattle. So this is obviously really good if you have enough rush cards in your deck, which is the theme for Warrior this set. Very broken weapon. And it's not so much that Red Band Wasp is great on its own, but it might be worth considering when you have Woodcutter's Axe. Also might be worth considering because you can get it from Town Crier and almost guaranteed have it on turn 2. Next up, Rabid Worgen. It's a 3 mana, 3/3 rush. It's okay minion overall. 3/3 stats for 3 mana, not great, but it will kill off a lot of 2-drops. So if they play a 2 mana, 2/3, it dies and then you have a 3/1 on board. Now, are there that many 1 or 2 drops that you're so desperate to rush down that you need to play that? I don't know about that. Feels more like an arena card than really a constructed quality card, so I think we will probably pass on that when it comes to building constructed decks. Red Band Wasp and Militia Commander and Darius Crowley seem to outperform it by quite a bit. And then finally Warpath, 2 mana, Echo, deal 1 damage to all minions. Originally I thought this was a kind of iffy card, but the more I think about it, the more it does sound like a solid board clear at all points in the game. 10 mana, deal 5 damage to all minions. 2 mana, deal 1 damage to all minions. At a lot of different points, you can help to clear the board with a card like this, and if you have anything like Acolyte of Pain to get extra value from it, then it's not only a decent board clear, but it can also be a good card draw engine, or Armorsmith for an extra gain armor engine. So it seems like a really good card to include in Control Warrior, whether or not you're playing cards like Red Band Wasp to, you know, get that extra enraged damage in. So this is probably going to be a card that sees a lot of play for sure. Okay, neutral cards, finally. Baku the Moon Eater. We've talked about it a lot. 9 mana, 7/8. The stats suck, obviously. You play it for upgrading your hero power. There are some hero powers which are pretty good when you upgrade them, like Warrior, where you gain 4 armor with every hero power, or Priest, where you heal 4 with every hero power. That said, you have to make your deck suck in order to make it work. I don't really think it's gonna work with many decks. If anything, it'll probably be more of a control thing. So like Warrior, where you get 4 armor for 2 mana, and that allows you to live long enough. So not too bad to consider there, but and there are no other Warrior cards that actually support this archetype. So it's not like they gave something to Warrior where, oh, you gain 4 armor and you get to include a sick minion in your deck. No, it's kind of meh. So we'll see, but I'm not really feeling it yet. It's the kind of thing where someone will have to really theory craft this exact deck list where it actually does become good, but I'm not seeing it yet. Azalina's Soul Thief. 7 mana, 3/3. Replace your hand with a copy of your opponent's. Saw this played on the stream. It was able to copy that Shaman legendary, the Shudderwalk, and it was actually really crazy when it copied that. But that was just variance and kind of, you know, a coincidence. Oh, you steal the Shudderwalk and then you get your own Shudderwalk, and then the Shudderwalk actually copies your opponent's hands as well. Maybe you do play this in a Shaman Shudderwalk deck. It does But then you have to play this before Shudderwock, and what if your Shudderwock is in your hand? Then you're kind of screwed, right? So probably a little better in aggro decks, so you could maybe consider it as an alternative to playing like Divine Favor and an aggro paladin, or maybe you play both. If you can copy 3 or 4 cards from your opponent's hand, it becomes pretty good. I think it's probably bad in a lot of decks, but if you have something that's kind of board focused enough that you do want to try to survive the late, or to have fuel to go in the late game, but not aggressive enough that there's no way you can afford to play a 7 mana 3/3, then there might be a place for it. The effect itself is strong, but it's going to require you to have probably some pretty unique deck lists. The alternative is you play it as a copy your opponent's control hand, but let's say if you're playing the classic priest versus warrior, do you actually want to take the warrior cards when you're the priest, or vice versa? I mean, you could argue, like, if you play so many warrior spells that, you know, you actually need some minions to win the game. So you copy your opponent's hand, and then they have minions, but then you don't have your removal tools, so I don't think it works out that well. So you also have Countess Ashmore next, which is probably one of the better cards in the set as well, and it's a neutral legendary. So 7 mana, 6/6, Battlecry, draw a Rush, Lifesteal, and Death Rattle minion from your, or card from your deck, sorry, so it can include cards that, like a spell that has Lifesteal, or a weapon that has Death Rattle, which makes it really easy to fit into, like, Rush Warrior, by the way. And you get to draw all 3 of those cards. This is better than Curator for 2 reasons. One, it has +2 attack, so 7 mana, 6/6. Not the worst stats, actually. And then these conditions to meet, it's easier because A, it doesn't have to be a minion. B, a minion with Rush, or a minion with Lifesteal, or a minion with Death Rattle. Usually you can find pretty decent options for all 3 of those. Curator before, if you're playing like a control deck, the Murlocs suck in control decks usually, except for maybe Cold Light Oracle. And if you're playing like an aggro deck, then, I mean, you could fit in like some dragons, like the 5 mana 5/5 that gives attack to random minions. But it's easier to just fill the conditions for Countess Ashmore to draw 3 cards, I think. Rush, Lifesteal, and Death Rattle are all pretty good card texts in a lot of different decks. And this set has a lot of support for all 3 of those keywords, so it should be pretty easy actually to make a deck where you can fit Countess Ashmore in it and get a lot of card draw value. So very sick card, we'll definitely see play. Gain Greymane, so if your deck has only even cost cards, you're starting hero power cost 1. Similar to Back of the Moon Eater, but maybe targeted towards classes more like Shaman, where 1 mana totems are really good, or Dude Paladin, where 1 mana 1/1 Silver Hand recruits are really good and can help you with some of those dude synergies. Could be worth considering in something like Hunter, but maybe not as much because you really don't want to deal 2 damage on your turn 1. You want to develop a turn 1 play. It's not too bad, and the stat line is a little better than Back of the Moon Eaters. 7/8 for 9 mana is abysmal. 6/5 for 6 mana. It's like a 5 mana minion for 6 mana, but Back of the Moon Eater is more like a 7 mana minion, barely, for like 9 mana. You do not want to play Back of the Moon Eater to the board. You hope you never draw it, basically. Yeah, I don't have a huge amount of faith for these decks either. I think Shaman is the most possible, but Shaman Totem decks, I don't know, Bloodlust Shaman, it's worth considering. Okay, next up, Dollmaster Dorian. 5 mana 2/6, whenever you draw a minion, summon a 1/1 copy of it. So if you have some really insane, let's say, Death Rattle effects, and you have a lot of draw going on in your deck, you might get some really good effects going on there, like Ysera, or a Lich King effect, or this next guy, the Splintering Festeroot, which I don't know why you would ever include it in a deck, but if you did, that is a good Death Rattle effect. I feel like it would be more of a Death Rattle based deck that you would put this in, or a late game value deck, both of which worth considering. Like if you can draw into that Lich King and Ysera and you get some of those extra cards to your hand, and then your opponent has to not only remove Dollmaster Dorian, but also the 1/1 tokens, I could see that being pretty decent value. It's a worthy card of consideration, but it's not game breaking really. I would have a hard time seeing it in any kind of aggressive deck though, so it's probably reserved more as a control play. Splintering Fester Root, so this is 8 mana 4/4. It death rattles into 2/2/2s that death rattle into 2 1/1s. So if you add in the 7 minions, or however, hold on, how many minions? Okay, 1 into 2 is 3, and then 3, yeah. Okay, 7 minions. It's like 14 of stats over a really long period, and if they just silence it, and Spellbreaker is everywhere right now, then you're just really sad. So this minion is awful. I don't think it'll see any play. I don't even think I would draft it in Arena. I don't really know what they were thinking here. Next up, Worgen Abomination. So 4 mana at the end of your turn, deal 2 damage to all other damaged minions. So if you have, let's say, like a Whirlwind effect, then you can Whirlwind and then play this, and then that will deal 3 damage to all minions. That's pretty good. Also worth consideration, you might not play the Warpath Warrior, but you could play a Greymane Control Warrior where... oh, wait. No, you might not play Greymane, so that you can still play Warpath, but you might play Baku the Moon Eater, and then Whirlwind plus this. That's a 8 mana play, but with odd cost cards, so kind of worthy of consideration, and options like that. Or you could just, you know, if you have a board where you're going to trade some 1/1s into other minions, you get that kind of effect to hit the board. It's kind of like playing Primordial Drake, which was a pretty good control card in general. Though the downside is it does have to be damaged minions. The upside, though, is that it can be multiple turns, so they do kind of have to remove it. It's a bit of a threat. If it's going to fit into any deck, it's probably going to be something more like a warrior, I feel like. Maybe a priest that plays Spirit Lash, and then you lifesteal with the Spirit Lash, plus clear the board with Worgen Abomination. Doesn't seem too bad. It's not a bad tech card. I probably will see very limited play, though. I think it would only be good in a couple of decks at best. Okay, so next up, Mossy Horror. This is basically AoE Stampeding Kodo, 6 mana, 2/7. Destroy all other minions with 2 or less attacks. So if you're like the Warlock and you're playing the Curse of Weakness, and you reduce your opponent's minions down 2 attack, or maybe down 4 attack, then you can basically board clear with a Mossy Horror, and then get a 6 mana, 2/7 on the back of it. If you're playing Priest, and you're playing Lady in White, then Lady of White goes off when you draw Mossy Horror. It's a 6 mana, 7/7. That battle cry destroys all minions with 2 or less attack, which seems like really good value to me. So any deck where you can kind of cheat the attack values around, maybe you play it with the Void Shifter, whatever that guy's called, swap attack and health. That could be pretty decent. It might be a decent tech card, probably more of a one-off though, because it is pretty high cost. So Muck Hunter. 5 mana, 5/8 rush. Battlecry, summon 2/1/1. Summon 2 2/1 Mucklings for your opponent. So a 5/8 is obviously a really good stat line, especially when it comes into rush like Doomguard. You don't even have to discard cards for it, but you probably need to have some kind of AoE effect going on, or minions that have low attack but high health. To hit the board, to kill off those Mucklings. Because if your opponent just uses the Mucklings to run back into this, like deal 4 damage to this minion, it becomes a 5 mana 5/4 with Rush, which is iffy. So it's better if you have a Whirlwind effect. Probably pretty good in Warrior though, because Warrior obviously has a lot of Whirlwind effects very easily. Seems like a pretty strong card overall. I think this will see some play. Also, obviously, if maybe you're playing like a Hunter deck where you benefit from your opponent having more minions on the field, like you unleash the Hounds and you just kill those Mucklings off for free, that's even better. So kind of a Control Hunter, a Rush Warrior, those are both very realistic options, I think. Next up, 4 mana Sandbinder, 2/4, Battlecry, draw an elemental from your deck. So it tutors for an elemental in a way that's slightly better than just drawing a card. And if you compare just draw a card, then you're thinking Gnomish Inventor, 4 mana, 2/4, draw a card. Is draw an elemental from your deck way better than just drawing a card from your deck? Slightly, but Gnomish Inventor isn't played at all, so I don't think this card's good enough. I think it will see no play unless you are in Arena, In which case, you have a few elementals in your deck already, and you draw one of them, and then that's pretty good as far as arena goes. Just doesn't feel very constructed competitive. Next up, Witch's Cauldron, 3 mana, 0/4. After a friendly minion dies, add a random Shaman spell to your hand. If you can sacrifice your board, maybe you have a bunch of totems, maybe you have Bloodlust, you sacrifice your board, and you Witch's Cauldron combined with that, so you lose your whole board, you trade for their board, and then you get 5 spells in your hand. Doesn't seem too bad. Also, if you are playing that Echo Murloc in a late game Hagatha deck, so you put 5 2/2s on the board, and then your opponent plays some minions, and then you Witch's Cauldron, you trade those 5 2/2s, you get a lot of value, and Witch's Cauldron also becomes a target they have to deal with. It's not unreasonable. It's interesting that you can play this in other classes, though. So if there are any classes that would benefit from having, let's say, a random Shaman spell, such as steal cards from your opponent's class rogue, because it just has to be any other class, for cards like Test Greymane to work in. So maybe you could play Witch's Cauldron in there, and then you just trade your bad minions like Face Collector or Cutthroat Buccaneer in. You get a few extra random cards, and it becomes a much better way to actually get non-rogue cards added to your hand so you can benefit with Test Greymane. And then you have a threat of a 3 mana 0/4 that can get extra value in the future, and they have to remove it. But will you have enough board presence to actually protect it, or will you have enough minions on your board so that this can actually get the value it needs to? I think you need to draw at least 2 random spells for this to even be worth really considering. That said, Mana Tide Totem has always been a staple in Shamans, so if those random spells are good for you like in Rogue, it's not super out of the question. It just feels like it's too slow and too weak and too greedy of a play for it to really work. Like Cult Master sounds great in theory. You sacrifice your minions and you draw cards and then you have a 4/2, but it's not really played, so it doesn't seem good enough, but I like this card a lot, so I will try it, especially if I'm playing that Rogue deck. So we'll see. Nightmare Amalgam. This is one of the funniest cards of the set. 3 mana, 3/4. It's everything. It's an elemental, a mech, a demon, a murloc, dragon. The idea here is that it synergizes with any set, but it also has the weaknesses of those sets. So if your opponent has a Hungry Crab, this is a murloc, so it gets destroyed and your Hungry Crab gets to be 1 mana, 3/4. If your opponent has Dragon Slayer, a 4 mana, 4/3, deal 6 damage to a dragon, this dies immediately, and then you're very sad. If your opponent has Galactic Crawler, destroys pirates, this dies immediately. You're very sad. Now, given those tech cards, which hate on decks, are not super popular, and you very rarely see them, especially at low ranks, it's okay. Like, if you need a filler card, like there are no good 3-drop dragons, then okay, sure, you can maybe justify. You just play this as a 3 mana, 3/4 solid minion for the sake of having those dragon synergies or your elemental synergies. And I think there are actually no really good tempo elementals, so this might make it into tempo elemental mage that just plays a bunch of minions. But yeah, that's basically the idea. It can fit into a lot of different decks, but it's a card you don't really want to play unless you are really desperate for a 3 mana, 3/4. But, you know, it's kind of a cool design. It's a card that's considerable for just about any deck, especially any tribal deck, but is also kind of at the bottom of the list by default because you don't want to play it unless you have to because of its inherent weaknesses. So pretty fun card. Next up, Voodoo Doll. 3 mana, choose a minion. If you death rattle, then destroy the chosen minion. So I guess this would be a card you could play one of those, you know, like Dark Pact style decks where you destroy your own minion for 1 mana, and then you get the effect. You immediately call off an enemy minion. That sounds really good, actually. So back up to Warlock. Dark Possession. So you deal 2 damage to your doll. You discover a demon, and for 4 mana, you get to execute anything you want on the board. 4 mana, execute a minion, and then discover a demon? Doesn't seem too bad, especially considering that to get good effects in Warlock, it tends to be a little bit more expensive anyway, so like 4 mana execute? It's not too bad. Sorry, not 4 mana execute, 4 mana assassinate. This kind of card, probably unique enough and decent enough that if you have a way to destroy it easily, it probably will see some play, but you have to be able to destroy it. You could just play Elven Archer too. So I guess technically any class can make that work. Maybe you play Elven Archer and Hunter, and then you Voodoo Doll control them. The kind of stuff I would come up with, right? Okay, so good enough to see some play, I think. Next up, Baleful Banker. 2 mana, 2/2. Choose a friendly minion, shuffle a copy of it into your deck. Now, there was a card I was really fond of, which was the 3 mana, 3/4 Manic Spellcaster, I think it was called. Mages had it, and it had the same effect. You copy a minion and put it into your deck, and 3 mana, 3/4 is better than a 2 mana, 2/2. But that card did not really see play. Maybe a couple times in one of, like, Reno Jackson Mages, it barely made it into the cut, but I can't recall really seeing it that much. I always tried to make it work, but it always feels kind of iffy. Like, it takes a long time for you to actually draw that extra minion, so you really have to cycle through your own deck for that kind of card. Now, they were playing it in the stream with Shaman, because obviously with Shudderwalk, if you put that in your deck, and how you would put it in your deck is you play Baleful Banker on any minion, you shuffle a copy of that into your deck, and then when Shudderwalk comes out, the effect triggers again, and if Shudderwalk is the only minion on your side of the board, then the Battlecry effect goes off on Shudderwalk, and you get a second Shudderwalk in your deck, and then you have infinite value, basically, because you'll always copy Shudderwalk into your deck. And that's pretty good as far as, like, winning the late game. Is that good enough to put a 2 mana, 2/2 on your deck? I don't know about that. It feels a little too greedy. Like the minion that Cthulhu decks had, which added Cthulhu back into your deck after it died, rarely saw play, because just having 2 Cthulhu's, expecting to get to the second Cthulhu is too greedy. If you play like that, you lose against aggro decks. So if it sees play, it'll be pretty limited, but obviously if there's a minion you really want to copy, then this has some value potential, but it would need to be a control deck. Next up, 8 mana Gilnean Royal Guard, 3/8 stat line. One thing you can notice about that stat line, which is really a health favored, is that if you have Lady in White, this becomes a 8 mana 8/8 Divine Shield Rush on all turns. And a 8 mana minion that has 8/8 stats that's pretty much guaranteed to kill any minion is pretty insane. But even without that, each turn this is in your hand, swap its attack and health. If you play it as a 8/3 Divine Shield Rush, then it kills big minions like Lich King, and it leaves you with a 8/3 minion left on board, which isn't too bad. I think that in itself makes it a good arena card, but also obvious synergies like Lady in White makes it a little bit better, a little bit more worth considering. It's probably towards kind of the bottom of the actual cards you would include in your constructed lists, but in some cases it just might be good enough. I guess classes that might be lacking removal, it might be worth considering. Things like rogues, where you have Vilespine Slayer still, but maybe you need something on top of that because you're going the late game rogue, or maybe instead of playing Twisting Nether and Warlock, you want to play Gilnean Royal Guard to just kill one minion rather than killing all your own minions as well. Only downside is you can't go face with it, but that's pretty much necessary for a card to be printed like this. Otherwise, it would basically be like Pyroblast. So, decent minion, good in arena. Chief Inspector, 5 mana 4/6, destroy all enemy secrets. Probably the best secret hate card that's been released to date, because this is a vanilla stat line that is good against those teched secret decks. So you can play this safely as a 5 mana 4/6 without really losing much. Like, you might be missing out on a special effect, but a 5 mana 4/6 on turn 5 is fine value. And if you know you're going up against a Paladin, which are probably going to be playing more secrets now, or you're going up against a Mage, which may still play secrets, and you're going up against a Hunter, which has secrets, or a Rogue that I don't know if they're going to actually be playing the secret rogues, the rogue secrets in this set, but they do exist, then you can get a lot of value out of that. So, like, a 5 mana 4/6 is a decent stat line, but then it also has that hate effect. So you could think of it like Galactic Crawler, right? It's a 2 mana 2/3, which is a fine card in terms of stats, but then if they have a pirate, they get screwed hard. So this is way better than, like, Eater of Secrets, where it was a 4 mana 2/4 bad stat line, not even really good enough to play as a 3-cost stat line. And then it gets +1/+1 when it destroys enemy secrets, but you get hit so hard when you're not going up against a secret deck that you can't play it. So this card is much better against non-secret decks, which makes it a lot more playable because you're not losing as much against all those other classes. So I'm glad that they finally came around to it and said, you shouldn't be punished that hard for teching against a deck that really is tough for you to beat, like Secrets Mage, for instance. Okay, next up, Witchwood Grizzly. 5 mana, 3/12. Taunt, lose 1 health for each card in your opponent's hand as a battle cry. Now, you need to be careful with the wording there. Lose 1 health, it's talking about the minion, so that means Witchwood Grizzly. And it's not lose, like, take 1 damage, but it's permanently lose 1 health. So if your opponent has 3 cards, this becomes a 3/9 with full health. It's not a 3/12 that has 9 starting health. It's just a 3/9. Which means it's harder to do synergies like healing and priest. Also, the way I originally read this is I thought it was the hero that loses the health, which means this would have always been a 3/12. It does not work like that. But it's still a pretty strong card. I think it will see play just in general because it crushes aggro decks so hard. Because your opponent aggro will have like 3 cards in hand at turn 5, and then you play this and it's a 3/9 taunt, and that's really hard for them to come back from. If you have any cards like Witching Hour and Druid, which allow you to pull a beast that died back to the field, or a resurrect effect in like Wild Mode Priest, or hell, you could even Diamond Spellstone still technically. That's not actually too bad. You know, it's good against aggro, and it's good to bring back, so there are definite potential synergies there. Also, you could recruit it out of your deck, so if you're playing Recruit Warrior, I think 6 mana recruit a 3/12 to the field with taunt is actually pretty good still, so good. Like, it really, 3/12 is probably like a 7 mana worth, so if you happen to get a Witchwood Grizzly instead of your Lich King out to the field, you still feel good about that. So yeah, it has good potential in those 3 decks at the minimum. And good enough just to play from your hand to the field just as like a 3/9 taunt in general. It's just kind of weak against control decks. Like, it would be bad against Hand Druid, because Hand Druid will always have 10 cards, but who knows how many Hand Druids there'll be. Next up, Mad Hatter. 4 mana, 3/2. Randomly toss 3 hats to other minions. Each hat gives +1/+1. So in my mind, this card is only really useful if you have minions that have 0 attack, like an Ag or a Mana-Tide Totem, or just any random totem in general. Or if you have minions, like that Paladin minion, what was its name? Paragon of Light, where you get that +1/+1 and then suddenly adds taunt and lifesteal. I think that's really one of the only cards that has that kind of, needs to gain more attack in order to have that effect. But if you have any cards which are going to be a lot better with +1/+1, then technically this can be as valuable as a 4 mana 6/5. So the 4 mana 6/5 is just kind of okay. I mean, 4 mana 6/5 is good, but that's like the best possible case. And this can hit enemy minions too, so it has to be board focused. Ideally, you want to clear your opponent's minions. You should have a lot of your own minions, and your minions should benefit a lot from having +1/+1. I don't think there are many decks that are really going to do that, and even in those decks, there might be better ways to buff your minions, so probably not going to see a lot of play, kind of a filler card, but not so bad that it isn't on the table. It's just probably not good enough. Okay, next up, Life Drinker, 4 mana, 3/3 beast. Deal 3 damage to the enemy hero, restore 3 health to your hero. So this could be good for a couple of reasons. Well, it's probably, okay, let me caveat that. It's probably not a good card. It's probably not going to see constructed play. And in Arena, it's just very So dealing 3 damage to the enemy hero is okay in the sense that you can kind of rush your opponent down a little faster. I think where it might have the most value is you restore health to your hero and you have cards that actually benefit from that. Maybe that could be something like a Happy Ghoul deck. So you heal 3, you deal 3 to your opponent's hero, you get a 3/3 on the board, and then your Happy Ghoul costs 0, so you play that from your hand, and then you have 2 3/3s for 4 mana, plus you did 3 damage, plus you healed for 3, so that could be like a Warlock, maybe? Like a Zoo Warlock? But, yeah, doesn't feel as competitive. Obviously, especially in those tempo decks, it's much better to deal 3 damage to a minion. So if this was like deal 3 damage to a minion and then restore health to your hero, that would be way better. So yeah, probably kind of iffy, probably not going to see play, but maybe you draft it sometimes in Arena. There are worse cards. Witchwood Piper, 4 mana, 3/3, draw the lowest cost minion from your deck and add it to your hand. So it's not necessarily going to be like a 1-cost minion. So if you have like, I don't know, like you're playing something like Recruit Warrior, but you actually want to have a couple earlier game plays, then you could play this. And if you haven't drawn your second Witchwood Piper, then this will draw the Witchwood Piper, which means that when you get to turn 6 and you actually play the recruit effects, all the minions remaining in your deck are going to be those big drops, and you're much less likely to accidentally recruit 4 mana 3/3, because you would have had to miss both of those cards all the way up until at least turn 6 in order for you to not just have them draw each other. Is that good enough? Kind of seems weak still. Like, would it be better to do that than just to play Blood Razor from the hand and, you know, use that to immediately hit a minion and just replace all your minions with spells? Probably not, but I think that's about as good as I can come up with. If getting rid of the low-cost minions from your deck is really important, and for some reason you need those early game minions, that could be a thing if you really need to tutor those low-cost minions. Aside from that, though, it's pretty weak. 4 mana 3/3 is not a good stat line. Okay, next up, Scale Worm, 4 mana, 4/4 beast. If you're holding a dragon, gain +1 attack and rush. So you probably have to play a dragon deck in order to put a 4/4 in your deck. So really, it's, if you're playing a dragon deck, it's a 5/4 rush, which is fine actually. 5/4 rush for 4 mana is pretty good because that's enough health to survive trading into most minions, and you get to deal 5 damage to a minion. So to me, that looks like a pretty good card. You could say, well then, Dragon Beast Hunter, which is kind of what they showed off in the scene, in the screen. Wait, what am I even saying? In the stream, Jesus. And it fell apart because there wasn't enough dragons in the deck. But maybe if you draw better, it's actually better than it looked like. Maybe if you include 1 or 2 more dragons, it's better than it looked like. And you know, 4 mana kind of removal card that might keep on the board does give you enough tempo to survive to those later turns, and maybe you could make the Emerus Hunter work. I think that's where they're going with that, but obviously it doesn't have to be in a Hunter deck if you're playing Dragon anything else. That kind of removal card seems pretty good to me. So if Dragon Priest is still a thing, maybe play Scale Worm. Seems fine. I mean, deal 5 damage to a minion for 4 mana, and sometimes you have a minion left on the board. I like that a lot. Next up, Night Prowler. 4 mana, 3/3. If this is the only minion on the battlefield, gain +3/+3. Probably a really bad card. I don't see many circumstances where neither player are going to have a minion on the board and then you're going to get a little bit of benefit. Like a 4 mana 6/6, it's like, it's okay. But it's easier to cheat out a Mountain Giant for 4 mana. Like just play Warlock and Life Tap and then you get a 4 mana 8/8 and that's just better. So, doesn't seem quite good enough, but maybe you put a 1-off, and maybe you just try to set up that board position where you get the swing turn of a 4 mana 6/6 combined with some other plays, and that's good enough. Next up, Phantom Militia. So this was one of the first cards they revealed. It's a 3 mana 2/4 Echo Taunt. To me, the place I see this guy working is with Summoning Portal and Warlock, because if you play Summoning Portal and then Phantom Militia costs 1 mana, so you get 6 2/4s for 6 more mana, and then that's basically turn 10, 2 cards, you get 6 2/4 taunts, and you get a 0/4 that has to be removed. So it's like if your opponent does not have a board clear, they're boned, and if they're an aggro deck, then they're probably boned too, because that's a lot of taunts to go through. It doesn't matter how many silences you have, that's 6 taunt minions. So I don't know if that's good enough to make it past meme status, but in theory, it doesn't sound too bad. And maybe there are some extra minions that have Echo that I'm not thinking of at the moment that could actually support Summoning Portal. But if you just play it by itself, it's pretty mediocre. Like 9 mana to get 3 2/4 taunts sounds really expensive to me. Doesn't seem good enough. Next up, 8 mana 7/7 Cauldron Elemental. Your other elementals have +2 attack. So it's kind of like Murloc Warleader as a late game for elementals. Plus 2 attack is kind of a lot, so 7/7 body is okay at 8 mana. If you're playing like those minion decks, like the elemental minion mage, and you need like a finishing turn, or you want to trade up into some bigger guys, and a lot of elementals are kind of mid-rangey, like 5 cost, then those 5 costs will start dealing 6 damage, and if you have 2 on board, maybe you can hit your opponent for like 12 damage. I think it'll probably be used more for like trading. I don't think you would probably put this in your deck, but you would consider discovering it off of a discover a random elemental or add a random elemental to your hand, and you wouldn't be too unhappy to see Cauldron Elemental if you're playing an elemental deck. In Arena, it's obviously not good enough because you won't have enough elementals to really benefit from it, but it's not too bad overall. Deranged Doctor, 8 mana, 8/8, Death Rattle, heal 8 health to your hero. I think this card is better if you can add something to it, like play Dead. So you're playing Hunter, you're playing a Control Hunter, it's an 8 mana, 8/8, that's going to heal you for 8, but then you heal 8 immediately by paying 1 extra mana, play Dead. So it becomes a 9 mana, 8/8, heal 16 over a couple turns, and that seems like a lot of staying power, so something like that might be worth considering. You could just put it in like any kind of Death Rattle deck, like a Quest Priest, maybe, and then that extra healing, it's a lot for people to go through. It's sort of like making up for the fact it doesn't have Taunt. Not like a super good card, but it's not terrible either. And if you do have a way to cheat out the Death Rattle effect, or to cheat out the minion from your hand, like the Coffin Crasher, then you could consider something like that. That said, probably Obsidian Statue is better in Priest specifically, so probably doesn't make the cut, but not too bad. Decent Arena card too, worth considering there. I mean, 8 mana, 8/8 is probably a card you would draft in Arena, so the fact it comes with 8 extra health is nice. Next up, Wormguard, 7 mana, 3/11. If you're holding a dragon, gain +1 attack and taunt. They tried to make this work with Dragon Hunter, but the dragon was never drawn, so it got played as a 7 mana, 3/11, which isn't great. It's just kind of a very okay-ish card. I think if you are gonna build Dust. Okay, sorry about that. Oh my god. Anyway, to finish this up, probably not good enough to run in a dragon deck, but maybe if you really need the big taunt, it's actually an option. I mean, 7 mana, 4/11 taunt, it is a lot of health. Maybe you would put it in Dragon Hunter, who knows. Like if you are really trying to get that Emerus late game package out, it's not the most unreasonable thing to think of. But you do have to have enough dragons for that proc to go off. So next up, Furious Etten, 7 mana, 5/9 taunt. Sounds considerably worse than a 4/11 to me. It's pretty much filler. If you are playing Lady in White Priest, then it becomes a 7 mana, 9/9 taunt. And that's not too bad. Probably more of just a solid card you pick up in Arena though. I can't really imagine it going into Constructed too much. Next up, 7 mana, Dark Mire Moonkin, 7 mana, 2/8, +2 spell damage. It's got a lot of health, so there's a good chance it'll stick around on the board. If you have anything that costs 1, 2, or 3 mana, where you can, deal some damage, maybe AoE, then it becomes not too bad. I kind of feel like in most cases, if you're really going for a spell damage card, you'd probably look more at Malygos then than a Dark Mire Moonkin to really go all in on like +5 spell damage, so I think it's going to be pretty much filler trash. Clockwork Automaton, 5 mana, 4/4, bad stats. Double the damage and healing of your hero power. So the place this is supposed to belong in is the odd even deck. So you might play back your deck, and then your hero power heals for 4, armors up for 4. Oh wait, this doesn't affect armoring up. Heals for 4, deals 2 damage, or maybe deals 3 damage if you're a hunter. And then you hero power at 7 mana, and it heals for 8 instead of healing for 4. And that sounds really mediocre because Heal Bot existed before, Antique Heal Bot, which was 5 mana, and you get the 8 healing immediately, and you can play it in any class, and you don't have to have the Baku deck in order to make that work. So this feels very trashy, probably not going to see play. It's worth considering. If you have some uber hero powers, like Taunt Quest Warrior, and then you get the Ragnaros Fireball effect, it will start doing 16 damage. So maybe in that kind of deck where you're trying to get like a Death Knight hero power and then double up on it, or a Quest hero power and double up on it, that might be worth considering as like a one-of and like a endgame combo. Maybe in Wild? Yeah, like maybe in Wild you can pull some stupid combo off with this, but aside from that, it's pretty much trash. Okay, next up, 5 mana, Rotten Apple Bomb. Taunt, Death Rattle, restore 4 health to your hero, 4/5. Not too much to say about it. It's a Death Rattle minion, which is relevant because, you know, cards that draw Death Rattle minions or bring back Death Rattle minions, it will matter there. But it's a 4/5 taunt, and it restores 4 health, so it's just a solid defensive card. Would you actually put it in a constructed deck? I kind of feel a little reluctant about that, but maybe it makes the cut in a couple decks that just need defensive minions where they don't really have defensive minions, such as maybe a Rogue or a Hunter. Next up, Fel Soul Inquisitor, 4 mana, 1/6 Demon, Lifesteal Taunt. So by itself, it's pretty bad. But if you can buff it up with some extra attack, then that Lifesteal Taunt becomes more relevant, and you might be able to heal a lot more than you might think. So it's really dependent on you having like an extra buff for this card. Maybe you play Blessing of Might and Paladin, and then turn 5, you make this a 4/6 with Lifesteal and Taunt, and if your opponent doesn't have the silence effect for it, and they have to run 3 minions into it to get rid of it, you heal for 12 and the aggro plan is over. But by itself, it's not really good enough. Kind of just common filler trash, but the Lifesteal shouldn't be underestimated. Lifesteal Taunt is a good combination. Oh, Lady in White. So you get this as a 4 mana 6/6 Lifesteal Taunt. That might be worth considering. Then again, Unpowered Steambot, 4 mana 0/9. This would become a 4 mana 9/9 if you play it with Lady in White. So do you want a 4 mana 9/9 that has a 0/9 stat line by default, or do you want a 4 mana 1/6 that can become a 6/6? Both seem pretty bad, but you know, it's not to be considered like it couldn't be good. Unpowered Steambot, obviously you can Divine Spirit Inner Fire that just without even playing Lady in White as well. So that is a lot of health. It's kind of scary. Next up, Swift Messenger. Rush. Each turn this is in your hand. Swap its attack and health. So 4 mana 2/6. On turn 4, it could probably clean up like a 2 mana minion, and then it would become a 2/3 on your board. 4 mana 2/3 that killed a 2 mana minion is okay. If it is like a 4 mana 6/2, then it's like a fireball to kill off one of your opponent's minions. The problem is you don't know which turn you're gonna, well, you might know what turn you're gonna need the attack or health on, but you won't be able to control it. So on that turn where dealing 6 damage to a minion for 4 mana would be really good. You might have it as the 2/6 version, and that might be the death of you. So for that reason, I don't think it'll really see much constructed play at all. But in Arena, it seems good enough to draft. Ravencaller, 3 mana 2/1, add 2 random 1-cost minions to your hand. So this is good in quite a few decks. It's good in random enemy class Rogue, because those random minions can be from any class, which might mean when you play again Greymane, or shoot, Task Greymane, whatever her name is, you can get those free extra 1-cost minions. It's good in Hand Druid because that's adding 2 extra cards to your hand, and maybe you don't play those cards for a little while, but it definitely counts as hand value for getting something like Mountain Giant out. Mountain Giant. For that same reason, you could put it in a Warlock. So turn 2 you play Life Tap, and then turn 3 you Ravencaller. Something like that. I don't know if that's too many cards, but in any case, helps you with Twilight Drake, helps you with Mountain Giant. Probably a card that can actually see some play if you are playing something that needs a lot of cards in your hand. Also, it's 1-cost minions, so you could put that in Quest Hunter as well, and it would be pretty good. 3 mana 2/1 that draws 2 relevant minions, or adds 2 relevant minions to your hand because you're completing the quest. That seems playable, or close to it. Next up, 3 mana 3/4 Tangle for Mystic. Add a random 2-cost minion to each player's hand. Decent start line, obviously. If you're playing a hand-based deck that needs Mountain Giants, then that extra card benefits you slightly more than it benefits your opponent. So you could think of it as like a 3 mana 3/4 that gives you a slight benefit, a slight edge over your opponent. And in that case, it becomes pretty okay, pretty worth considering. Blackwalled... Oh, you could also consider it in like a again Greymane / Baku the Hunter, Baku the Moonlord deck, because that'll give you a 2-cost minion where you can't normally have a 2-cost minion. So if you're like on turn 4 or 5 and you would have floated 1 extra mana, by having that 2-cost card, you don't get disadvantaged as much by the weirdness of your deck construction. Blackwalled Pixie, 3 mana 3/4, Battlecry Refresh your hero power. It's very similar to Clockwork Automaton. You would need something really broken to cheat out with that. I would think something like Ragnar's Fireball from Taunt Warrior, and then you refresh it, and then you get to do it again. That seems pretty solid, actually. But just the Baku decks and the Greymane decks, those hero powers probably aren't good enough for you to want to play a hero power, Blackwalled Pixie, and then you hero power again on 7 mana. Doesn't seem quite good enough, but it's worth mentioning it is still a 3 mana 3/4, so it'll be a solid arena draft. Pumpkin Peasant, it's another one of these swap attack and health minions. 3 mana 2/4 that can be a 4/2, always has lifesteal. It's just kind of if you're really desperate for a lifesteal minion, it's not totally out of the question, but I don't think it's really much of a constructed material. It's just something that's okay enough for arena, and the turn that you actually decide to play it on probably will kind of have one of those skill differentiators between people a little bit, because if you hold off one turn, maybe the 2/4 health, the 2/4 stat line benefits you a lot more than the 4/2. Marsh Drake, 3 mana 5/4 dragon. Summon a 2/1 poisonous Drake Slayer for your opponent. So the idea here is you obviously have to kill the Drake Slayer somehow when you play this card. 3 mana 5/4 is really powerful stats, but if you just let your opponent kill it with the minion you summoned for them, that makes no sense. So if you have Unleash the Hounds, then unleashing and killing that minion is really good. If you're playing a warrior and you Whirlwind, that minion just dies for free. If you play Elven Archer, that's going to kill the Drake Slayer off. Really, you just need a way of dealing with that minion, and then it becomes a reasonable option. And since it's a dragon, if you do need to play dragon synergies, then this becomes a pretty good option for a dragon deck as just kind of a decent minion. But you do have to have a way to deal 1 damage. That's pretty important. Hench Clan Thug, 3 mana 3/3. After your hero attacks, give this minion +1/+1. If you're playing like a Tempo Weapon Warrior, and you turn 2, you equip the Woodcutter's Axe. On turn 3, you attack with your hero. This becomes a 4/4, already good. And they have to kind of kill this, because on your second charge of the weapon, or future weapons, you might make it into a 5/5. So this is actually a minion which might be neutral, but it actually seems good enough to run in some cases. Another really good candidate is Rogue, because the hero power, or a Kingsbane Rogue, you attack, and this becomes a 4/4, and then you're almost always going to have a weapon, so they have to kill it. It's a 4/4 they have to kill for 3 mana. That's actually good. So in weapon-based decks, or maybe Druid, it's kind of a worthy consideration. Next up, Walnut Sprite, 3 mana 3/3 Echo. I guess this would be the other card you could play with the Summoning Portal, because you could make a board of 18 worth of Walnut Sprites on turn 10, so you get Summoning Portal and 6 Walnut Sprites. 10 mana? That's actually like 18-22 of stats. That's super weak to AoE, but if they don't have an AoE, that's pretty good value. And then you trade off your board, and if the Summoning Portal is still up, then they're probably going to lose the game. But it does seem a little bit memey. And 3/3 on turn 3 is kind of iffy too, so I wouldn't hope too much for that to work. Okay, 2 mana Lost Spirit. It's a 1/1. Death Rattle, give your minions +1 attack. don't really think this is good enough to play because it is a 2-mana 1/1. The fact that it gives your minions +1 attack as a death rattle doesn't really matter. Why would you play a 2-mana 1/1 that death rattles to give +1 attack when you could play a 2-mana 2/2 Direwolf Alpha to immediately give your adjacent minions +1 attack? And yeah, you have a bigger body on top of that. So Direwolf Alpha outcompetes this card. I don't think the fact it's a death rattle minion matters much. Not going to see play. I don't even think I would draft it much in Arena, so it's just pretty bad. Spell Shifter, 2-mana 1/4, spell damage +1. Each turn this is in your hand, swap its attack and health. 2-mana 4/1 with +1 spell damage, it's okay. 2-mana 1/4 with +1 spell damage seems a little bit better. If you have cards that benefit decently from spell damage, like Arcane Explosion, or Maelstrom Portal, which is rotating out so it no longer is an option, then a 2-mana 1/4 with spell damage is actually not so bad. But I don't feel like there's really any combination with this that makes it good enough to actually include in a constructed deck. But if you do draft a lot of cards in Arena that are spells, I think this would make the cut sometimes. You could also just play it as, oh, it's a 2-mana 1/4 or 2-mana 4/1, but that just sounds very mediocre. Next up, Vicious Scalehide, 2-mana 1/3, Lifesteal Rush. Probably one of the better neutral cards in the set. So this is good for a few reasons. One, it's Lifesteal and Rush. So if you play Countess Ashmore, if that was her name, then this qualifies for both keywords as a card you can draw from your deck. So it makes it very easy to complete that Death Rattle, Lifesteal, Rush trinity that you need to draw 3 cards from your deck. It's a beast, so you can play it with, let's go back up here to Hunter cards, Dire Frenzy, where you put copies of it into your deck, which are 4/6 Rush Lifesteals, and it itself becomes a 4/6 Rush Lifesteal, giving you a lot of sustain as a Hunter. Also, you could consider it in a Warrior deck, which is going to be playing Woodcutter's Axe, because when that Death Rattle triggers and you give a minion that has Rush on your field, +2 attack and +1 health, it becomes a 2-mana 3/4 Lifesteal Rush. And I don't know, there might be a case where the opposing deck is so aggressive that you actually do need to play on the defensive, so the Lifesteal really matters there. I don't know if you would put it in Warrior, but it's not out of the question. So it seems really good in Hunter. Lifesteal Rush is a good combination, so if you have a way to buff it up and you need that healing for some reason, or you have healing based effects, it's not a bad card to consider, and it is a decent filler card to draw with Countess Ashmore regardless, as long as you have some way to really benefit from one attack minion. Maybe you could include it in Countess Ashmore Lady in White deck, because then it becomes a 2-mana 3/3 Lifesteal Rush. Seems good. Okay, next up, Swamp Dragon Egg. 1-mana 0/3, add a random dragon to your hand. Speaking of Lady in White, these eggs, including the ones from Angora, would become 3/3s, so this would be a 1-mana 3/3 if you have Lady in White already played. Add a random dragon to your hand. It's okay. It's kind of less good than drawing a card. I think what's good about this is it's a 1-mana minion your opponent doesn't want to attack into, so if you can buff it or give it taunt, or both of those, then it becomes annoying to deal with, like Defender of Argus, and it becomes a 1/4 that Death Rattle, add a random dragon. Maybe that dragon benefits you because you're playing Dragon Synergy somehow. Maybe you have some extra ways to trigger Death Rattle effects. I don't know if you would play dead this, but you could. So play dead to be 1-mana, add a random dragon to your hand doesn't seem great, but could be a good desperation play. Like, oh, you need an extra mana, so you don't get the big effect from play dead, but you do get a random dragon, which allows you to have a play for that turn. And finally, Swamp Leech. 1-mana 2/1 Lifesteal. It's a beast. I mean, 1-mana minions, there's not too much to say about them. Is this better than other 1-mana minions you would consider? Like, you could consider a 1-mana 1/3, like the Dire Mole, instead of this, which does not come with Lifesteal, but does have extra health, so it's more likely to live. This will get you a couple points of health back if your opponent doesn't kill it with, like, a Fire Blast. Worth mentioning, it will deal 2 damage if the Hero Power Rogue or Hero Power Druid, because the Leech is going to hit their opponent's face for 2 damage, so you'll get a little bit of health back there. But what deck are you going to play where it's control based, where you really want those low cost lifesteal minions? Maybe Quest Hunter, because Quest Hunter wouldn't have a lot of healing. Maybe you're just happy to get it as a random beast off of cards like Ravencaller. It doesn't really seem like something you would actually put in your deck, though. It seems more like a card that will sometimes randomly show up. It's not the worst card to draft in Arena, so you'll see some of it there, but not too much else to say about it. I don't think it's good enough to put in your deck. I think there are better one-drop Hunter minions you could include. Probably Argent Squire is better than that, because the Divine Shield, so not good enough. And I believe that comes to the conclusion of this incredibly long review of every card in the Witchwood expansion. So if you watched this far, thank you, and I hope you found listening to my opinions on the matter reasonably insightful and interesting. So this should be a very cool set we're going into. I liked the live stream a lot. Once again, check that out if you haven't already. I think they have like a broadcast rerun on Twitch TV. And I'll see you guys in my future Witchwood videos.